Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Lab. My name is Zan Zerbel, and for anyone who's new to the lab, this is where we have conversations with a wide range of adventurous individuals to educate, stoke, and inspire. In today's episode, Liz Craig hands the show over to Jared Kennedy of the Greater Hells Canyon Council and the Intrepid Trio Whitney La Ruffa, Naomi Hudetz, and Mike Unger, who thru-hiked the newly established Blue Mountains Trail. They give us a history of the Blue Mountains and the trail, take us along their journey, and so much more. So with that, on to the show.
So let's go around real quick and do some introductions. As I mentioned before, we've got Jared from the Greater Hells Canyon Council to get us oriented on the Blue Mountain Trail and its backstory. We have Whitney, who has logged over 10,000 miles on long distance trails in the US and is our connection to the mountain shop, as he is the Six Moons Designs VP of Sales and Marketing. Additionally, we have Naomi, who since completing her first thru hike of the PCT in 2009, has rearranged her life to be able to hike as much as possible. And finally, Mike, who is a double triple crowner, having thru hiked the PCT, AT, and CDT twice. So to get things rolling this afternoon, I'm going to pass the screen over to Jared to give us an introduction to the Blue Mountain Trail, also known as the BMT.
Thank you, Liz. All right. I'm Kennedy, Project Trail Lead for the Blue Mountains Trail. It's great to be here today talking about the Blue Mountains Trail with you all. I'm leading the effort up on behalf of Greater Hells Canyon Council. So as you can see from this map, the trail starts in Joseph or Wallowa Lake State Park and runs in a spiral-like shape, ending up in John Day, Oregon, through the Blue Mountains. It runs 566 miles. It traverses the 7 wilderness areas of northeastern Oregon and also the Hells Canyon National Recreation Area. And I'll let Mike, Whitney, and Naomi kind of give you guys the highlights of the trail along the way, but it covers some incredible ground. It also runs through some amazing communities of northeastern Oregon: Troy, Tollgate, LeGrand, Sumter, Austin Junction, Anthony Lakes. I like to think that LeGrand kind of separates the trail into its northern and southern half. It's also the headquarters of the Greater Hells Canyon Council. There are a few things we really wanted to prioritize when routing the trail. It ties together existing trails and road routes, so we're not building new trail along the way. We really wanted to limit road walks, or at least paved road walks and bushwhacks. And most importantly, we wanted it to be an immersive adventure through the Blue Mountains. So to give you a little bit of broader orientation, the Blue Mountains, conveniently colored blue on this map, are Oregon's largest ecoregion. To describe it, I'm going to use the words of my colleague, Christina DeVilliers, GHCC's Wild Connections Coordinator. The Blue Mountains are big, rugged, and largely undeveloped, rich with refugia, history, and adaptive possibility. The region is situated at the crux of 4 ecoregions: the Columbia Plateau, the Cascades, the Rockies, and the Great Basin. And it shows in the diverse geology and topography. Functionally, the Blues are a crossroads, a hub for species movement. The region's waterways are its ecological corridors, supporting species at every scale, from butterfly to black bear, bull trout to mountain lion. Here, you can follow water 8,000 feet down, from glacial headwaters in the mountains to the prickly pear depths of Hells Canyon, over just a few dozen miles. It has some of the oldest sites of confirmed human habitation yet discovered in the Americas. People have lived here eating salmon, camas, and chokecherry, and telling stories and running rivers for more than 16,000 years. It is an outdoor adventurous paradise, a network of friendly, small, land-loving communities, a stronghold for climate resilience, and a huge conservation opportunity. So like I said, this is an effort being led up by Greater Hells Canyon Council. You can follow us and learn more on our website, and you can also email me for more information if you'd like. There's the website and email address. We have an option to sign up for newsletters to follow along our work as we continue to develop the trail, and to share stories like this one that Mike, Naomi, and Whitney are going to share with you today. Greater Hells Canyon Council was formerly the Hells Canyon Preservation Council. It came into being in 1967 to block the efforts to dam the Snake River that would have flooded their beloved Hells Canyon. They were successful and went on from there to protect many, many acres of northeastern Oregon with permanent protection. and continue to work in protecting the area today. So the trail actually started in the 1970s. It was the idea of Lauren Hughes, a former HCPC director, an incredible conservationist for his time. He was joined by Dick Hensey, Mike Higgins, and Greg Dyson, and supported by many others who helped build this trail concept. Lauren and Dick are no longer with us, and with their passing, the efforts languished to build the trail. But a year ago, with a lot of help from Mike Higgins and many others, we started again. We picked it back up. So as I introduce Mike, Naomi, and Whitney, I want to give some context about how the trail became, how we got this trail ready for the three of them to go and take on this challenge this year. In November of last year, we had the old route. It was an 800-mile loop. We got together along with my father, Jim Kennedy, who's a GHCC board member, and Mike, and a few others as well. And we put together a new route. By April, we had this new spiral route that went through the wilderness areas of Northeastern Oregon. Renee Patrick, ONDA's Oregon Desert Trail Coordinator, lent a hand. She helped us with a number of resources and broader guidance. And she also introduced me to Mike, Naomi, and Whitney. Although I'd met Whitney before, she introduced me to him in the context of him through hiking the trail. And they signed up to ground truth this whole route. See if our line on the map stuck, like we like to say. We really couldn't have been luckier to find the three of them. Their trail names are All Good, that's Whitney's, Iron Mike, and The Punisher, which is Naomi there. And just a funny aside, we were talking the other day, no one's ever heard Naomi complain, period, in life, and Mike can confirm that. But at least that much is certainly true for the trail. We've been calling them the Intrepid Trio in GHCC because they took on this trail in some very challenging conditions and made friends with everyone along the way. I'd be remiss not to mention a few other people. In the upper left-hand corner is a photo of Lauren Hughes, the originator of the trail, standing over his beloved Hell's Canyon. Renee Patrick is in the upper right. She completed the trail about a month after the three of these guys finished it. The bottom left is our Intrepid Trio with Mike and Donna Higgins. They stayed with Mike and Donna for a night and halfway along the way, and then Mike also drove many miles around Northeastern Oregon, shuttling them and resupplying them and taking care of Renee along the way also. And I also want to share this photo of myself, my dad. It's been a dream of ours to see this trail come to life for the last 10 years since we first heard about it. And here we are on our own small 3-day section hike at Baldy Lake beneath Mount Ireland in a really special part of Northeastern Oregon along the trail. So to finish this up before I turn it over, the three of these guys, our Intrepid Trio, hiked a route that is very different from what people are going to experience in the future. There were parts of our line of our map that stuck and parts that didn't, and they're going to share some stories of both of those with you. But we've learned a lot, and we've routed some alternates that's going to make this trail a stronger trail in the future. There are some areas on the trail that need some major love, and they've helped us prioritize and identify those areas that we can start to clear in the future as well. And like building any through hike, this is a long-term concept, a long-term project, and one that we want to hopefully at the end of the day end up being a world-class opportunity for recreation in an amazing ecosystem. Because the Blues are absolutely incredible place. They're an amazing landscape, very terrain, amazingly diverse forests, a unique opportunity to access solitude. You can hike for days without seeing people, and a very landscape that most Oregonians don't even know a lot about. And we think it deserves its place on the map. And Mike, Whitney, and Naomi are going to show you why in their photos today. So we hope that you share in the awe of this place and also come and join us and visit us at some point, and continue to follow along as we provide resources, maps, and more inspiration for the trail. And so with that, let me introduce Whitney, All Good, La Ruffa, Mike, Iron Mike Unger, and Naomi, the Punisher Hudetz, who are going to take you through their journey through the Blue Mountains Trail. Thanks, guys. I have to figure out how to stop sharing my screen 1 second.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks.
We're gonna have Naomi's gonna get our slides up for us.
All right.
Yeah.
I need to screen share. right.
Can you see it? See this, Liz? Great. I am Mike Unger, and just want to start off by saying sort of what our mission was for this trip. Jared had asked us to ground truth his preliminary route, to basically see if it's viable as a future route, to explore other route opportunities, to find and verify water sources. Now, let me just stop at that for a moment. This is a really critical issue for us because, as many of you know, just because there's a blue line on a map indicating a seasonal water source, we had no idea whether it was going to be feasible to do this hike with existing natural sources, or whether we were going to have to cache water. Fortunately, we did find out that we're able to do the route without having to cache water. There was enough natural sources, even in Hell's Canyon on the rim in September, to get through, so that was exciting. We also tried to verify resupply opportunities along the way. On our trip, I'm going to go to the next slide, Naomi. We sort of our trip by the numbers. Our route was a little longer than Jared's current route. We hiked 588 miles in about 32 days. We took 2 days off. We had 7 resupply stops. Resupply was a bit of a challenge. A lot of the places that we got food from in Hell's Canyon, the Buckhorn Lookout, we actually had a friend, Ron Moak, the owner of Six Moon Designs, meet us with food because there were no convenient towns. And some other towns, such as Troy and Sumter, just don't have great resupply opportunities. So we had to either have someone meet us or mail boxes along the way. And our route involved 85,000 feet of elevation gain and 86,000 feet of loss. And sort of a quick elevation profile. As you can see, there were no easy flat sections along the way. And ironically, because we were tracking our daily ups and downs, our biggest elevation gains and losses were our first day on the trail and our last full day on the trail. So you're really bookended by some really challenging terrain. So Whitney, do you want to go through some of the highlights?
Yep. All right. So thanks for joining us. So this trail was really very unique and had some great highlights along the way. We had some world-class scenery, including the Eagle Cap wilderness part of the Walala Mountains. Hell's Canyon was another world-class beauty. The Elkhorn Crest, the North Fork of the John Day River, and the Strawberry Mountains. I'd say, like, for world-class beauty, those sections there are really what stand out in my mind as some of those beautiful scenery we saw. The trail also has a lot of diversity. Going into this hike, I kind of envisioned it being pretty similar to the Oregon Desert Trail, that I was going to be hiking through just endless seas of sagebrush for days. And really that couldn't be farther from the truth. The trail went from high alpine areas that looked like it was right out of the Sierras or the Wind River Range to desert sections in Hell's Canyon. It also went through a really unique high desert forest, is kind of how I describe it. That was very diverse. It included ponderosa pines, aspen trees, larch, and it has some of the largest intact old growth forests on the east side of the Cascades. So it was a really unique area to walk through. And there was really incredible forest diversity. Just the variation of trees and kind of the biodiversity of each forest is very healthy and very nice to see, instead of more of a monoculture you might experience on like the west sides of the wet side of the Cascade, so to speak. You also go by, I believe, the largest living organism in the world, which is a mushroom. I don't remember the exact name of it right off the top of my head, but it's a gigantic mushroom that grows out there in like the Strawberry Mountain area. So it's really cool to see that too. Besides the diversity and the world-class beauty, this trail also really explores a lot of history of our region along the way. It does share part of the Nez Perce Nimiipuu National Historic Trail, which is a trail that is managed and designed to follow the route of the Nez Perce when they had to flee the U.S. cavalry after in the late 1800s. It also travels through Nez Perce precious lands in Joseph Canyon, which is a really remarkable area. It also passes through a lot of tribal land with the Confederate tribes of the Umatilla Warm Spring, and other tribes in the region. And Jared pointed out to me recently that this part of Oregon is where there was a lot of overlap with a lot of tribes. In fact, I can remember on the Continental Divide Trail, there's an old road that you go over. It's called Lewis and Clark Pass now, but that's actually one of the oldest passageways that tribes from the Great Plains used to come to the Pacific Northwest to pick berries or gather obsidian, and vice versa for tribes to travel from the Pacific Northwest into the plains to hunt buffalo. So this all kind of ties together. It's also pretty rich with history of Oregon pioneers, the Oregon Trail, and Oregon's gold rush that happened in the 1800s. It also had two very unique areas that we went by. One was a water flume that was a handmade wooden pipe that carried water to a power station that then was used to provide power in Sumter for a lot of the mining. And it also passed a spot called the El Dorado Ditch, which I knew nothing about or even existed until this hike. But the El Dorado Ditch, I have it right here on my other screen, let me read it. It's a mining ditch started in 1863. It was completed 11 years later, all by Chinese labor. It cost at the time $500,000. It was 100 miles in length. Starting on the Last Chance Creek and ending at Malheur City, the ditch size is 5 feet at the bottom and 7 feet at the top. It's graded at 4.8 feet per mile with a carrying capacity of 1,500 minor inches. The ditch actually was a pretty big source of controversy between miners and ranchers and was abandoned in 1900. So it's a very interesting kind of just side note to come across this thing in the forest, and it was still flowing well, and we drank water out of it. It was nice and cold and clear. So also along this trail, there's a lot of wildlife, some that we saw, some that we didn't. Big highlight for us was mountain goats. We saw a lot of mountain goats on the Elkhorn Crest. This mountain goat here in particular actually kind of followed me along. I got actually pretty close. It was kind of spooky at times. We saw bighorn sheep. We saw a lot of indicators of bear in the form of bear scat. Everywhere we went, I've never seen this much bear scat in my life. Although with 3 people walking through the woods, we never did get a chance to see a bear. We saw quite a few rattlesnakes in Joseph Canyon and the Wanaha River. There are wolves in the area. We saw wolf tracks, but we never saw any wolves. There's cougars. We saw elk, mule deer, eagles, and a large variety of birds throughout our hike, which is really cool to see. And as Jared pointed out, there were some really great towns along the way for just to kind of resupply and refreshing. Those included Troy, the town of Tollgate, which isn't much of a town. When I say town, it's pretty loose. A lot of these towns are kind of one store, maybe a place to lodge. Tollgate was a great highlight though, great bakery, really nice people. LeGrand is the biggest town you go through. That was a really nice place, very surprising. I've always driven through LeGrand on my way to Idaho. I'd never really spent any time there, but after spending 3 days there, I was just about ready to sell my house in Portland and move to LeGrand. It's that nice of a town. The town of Sumter is pretty rich with history. The town of Austin Junction is really more of the Austin Junction store and Bates State Park down the road, but I'd be remiss not to give Christine a big shout out. She was a wonderful host, let us mail boxes there. In fact, when we were done our hike, we took the long way home to stop there and have breakfast just to say hi to her on our way home. And finally, the town of John Day, where we ended our hike. This is a picture of where we ended our hike at a brewery. As Mike pointed out, terminus are very important, and this one has a world-class end, and everybody there was just super friendly. I'd say the other really great part of this hike is solitude. If you're looking for a hike, especially a long-distance hike, where you're guaranteed not to see any other hikers and really get to escape it all, this is the trail for you. Besides the Wallalas, we never really ran into any other hikers. We did run in to a couple of bow hunters occasionally, bow hunting camps for elk. But besides that, most of the time we're just the 3 of us by ourselves in the wilds, and it was really wonderful. All right, send it over to Naomi, who's gonna talk about the challenges we faced.
Yeah, I could just talk about all the great fun challenges we had on this trip. There were many, but that's kind of what makes it fun in my opinion. Diverse terrain, Whitney talked about this a little bit, but yeah, you got your high alpine, you've got your desert canyons, and what makes that hard about that is how do you pack for that? What kind of gear do you bring? I was expecting really, really cold nights, and so I brought my 15-degree bag, and I kind of sweated almost every single night. It was just too hot. So yeah, it's tough. And you also are packing for the possibility of snow and desert heat. So you got to have a lot of different layers there. Unpredictable weather as well. We did have a little bit of rain, and when it was raining, it was cold. So not only are you wet, but you're cold, and you just never know. It could rain in the desert as well, as some people recently going through Hell's Canyon could tell you. There's also, I guess I don't have a slide for this, a narrow hiking window. You can't really start until the snow melts out on really on either end, on the John Day end or the Joseph end. And that is probably going to be mid-July. So, and then you want to get done probably when we were getting done early October is probably the end of the season. So that's a pretty short hiking season you've got there. One of the biggest challenges for us was the unverified water sources. You can see here in this photo, this used to be some kind of, probably for cows, some sort of trough, but there was not a drop of water to be found in that one. So yeah, we didn't know what we would find. We didn't know if we'd have to cache water. We were lucky to have some support in the first couple legs of our trip. But as Mike mentioned at the beginning, it turned out we actually didn't need to cache water. And again, being it's late, early October, we were surprised at the amount of good water sources. Another really big one was the uncertain trail conditions, leaving the Eagle Cap where there's beautiful, well-maintained, well-used trails. And this is pretty much what we hit after we left. And, take your variation of this kind of trail off and on throughout the trail. And we were expecting that. We just didn't know when and where and how bad it would be. Poison oak and blackberries, we definitely were not expecting poison oak. None of us, I purposely left behind my poison oak scrub. I didn't think I'd need it. It ended up causing one urgent care virtual visit to cure that. And in the same area, there were literally walls of blackberries that were just hard to find their way around. So that you were kind of in places we were bushwhacking through poison oak and blackberries, probably within 50 feet of each other. Logging and mining. You can see there on the left, that was a road we were supposed to take and it was just gone. They'd logged it over. And some of the mining claims here on the right, they sort of take some liberties when in describing their private property boundaries. Don't always match the maps. And this year we had wildfire smoke, and when it hit, we didn't have anything, and we were sitting there, and then I don't know, lunchtime, this just giant bank of wildfire smoke rolled in and took away some of our views and made it hard to breathe sometimes as well. So amazingly, the fires were coming from the west sides of the Cascades, and we didn't actually have any active fires around us. But yeah, I think wildfires are going to be an issue going forward. One other thing I want to mention before we go on to the next slide is the difficulty of maps and whether or not they actually match reality. I ran into this on the Idaho Centennial Trail as well, where trails that show up on the map don't necessarily show up on the ground, and trails that are on the ground don't always show up on the map. And so you have to sort of piece your way through those situations. And as the ICT guy told me, sometimes you just have to trust the good trail. So I'll turn it back to Mike.
Yeah, so now we'll just sort of walk through some of the different sections. And this is kind of in our minds of how we broke up the hike into these sort of big, cool regions. Starting with Eagle Cap Wilderness, which I'm guessing a lot of folks are already aware of. This was actually the very first place I ever went backpacking with my dad when I was 12. It's the first place Naomi and I ever backpacked together almost 30 years ago. So it's a special place in my mind. I think of all the places I've hiked, it's among the most beautiful I've ever experienced. It is the one place along the hike where you saw a lot of other hikers, but the trails are well maintained and it just is spectacular. So if anyone who hasn't been there, I highly recommend it. So just incredible alpine views. Well, the challenge is it can snow anytime. I've been snowed on in August up here. It was hot when we were there, and some of the climbs are brutal. And so it's a tough way to start. That the first day you're climbing over 5,000 feet of elevation, but it's really worth it. And I just can't speak enough of it. And then it's amazing. You go from this alpine scenic beauty and you go into Hell's Canyon, which is this, and Whitney will talk about it some more, which I had never hiked in before. Just amazing desert canyons and harsh and brutal beauty. And the one thing I will say before I throw it over to Whitney for talk about Hell's Canyon some more, this was the one section that was very difficult to resupply in. So future hikers that are looking to do a continuous through hike, I know Jared's going to work on that, but there just aren't a lot of towns nearby or places to get food. So that was the one challenge we had. Whitney?
All right, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing to point out, you'll see a couple of photos in here or somewhere along the way is the owner of my company, Six Moon Designs, Ron Moak, has an adventure van. And to make sure that we were kind of safe and knowing that we would have to kind of have some challenges ahead of us, he came and supported us for the first 13 days of the hike. And I think that really did make a big difference to meet up with him every couple of days and be able to grab food right out of the van or water, you know, and since there wasn't really any towns to kind of supplement with extra snacks or a cheeseburger out, he would go ahead and, you know, cook us cheeseburgers on the side of the trail and stuff. So if you ever have the opportunity to have a supported hike, I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful benefit to long distance hiking. So without further ado, let's talk about the next section, which was Hell's Canyon to the Buckhorn Overlook. So this area goes along the Western Rim Trail, which is a national recreation trail. I didn't really know anything about it. I kind of always figured Hell's Canyon was just this big desert scape, but I was really shocked when we got in there how wonderful and big the pine forests were up on the rim. And walking up on the rim of Hell's Canyon to me is one of the highlights of this trip. It was just absolutely beautiful. It was really rugged, these great canyon scenes all along the way. And I just really enjoyed that part. And then we did drop down to Doug Bar. So here's kind of some of the hike you can see that we had to do some bushwhacking stuff. But Doug Bar, since then, they kind of rerouted things down Cow Creek. This was a really beautiful ridge walk. But the challenge was when we left this beautiful long ridge walk after a day and a half was we dropped down into a creek canyon that was very overgrown with poison oak once again, and just a lot of prickly and thorny bushes that were tearing us apart. But once we got down in the Snake River, we had a nice reprieve. We were able to resupply some water, kind of wash up, enjoy eating snacks while we looked at black widow spiders all around us. And then we hiked along the Nimipu Trail along the Imnaha River, where the Imnaha River, which is absolutely gorgeous. It was actually one of the best campsites I think we had in the whole hike. We camped right down at the bridge of Cow Creek, and it had some really nice big locust trees. We stopped kind of early that day. We were able to soak our feet and get really well hydrated. Now, I will say when we were hiking that day, we were sitting at Doug Bar and we met two gentlemen came up on dirt bikes and we started talking to them. And one of them turned out to be the sheriff of Walla County. And in our conversation, he told us that his favorite part of his job was search and rescue. And we could tell as he looked the three of us over, he told him what he was doing, that he was convinced he was going to come do a search and rescue on the three of us. When we told him where we planned to go that night, Buckhorn Overlook, he kind of politely said to us, because it was midday at this point, he said, if I were the three of you, I would walk over to Cow Creek, camp right there along the river. It's nice and flat. There's some good trees. And I'd probably tackle that climb in the morning. And I think he was right, because the next morning, I forget, I think we did 4,200 feet. Is that right, Mike?
It was, yes. And
4,200 feet in 7 miles, but really it was like 4,200 feet in 5 miles. And it was quite the climb out of the canyon. But the cool thing was after we crossed the Imnaha River, we did get on the Nez Perce Trail again and climb up to Buckhorn Overlook. And it was just absolutely stunning. Yeah, here's one of the photos going into an old ranch up to it was kind of broken up. There was a big bushwhack that we wound up doing, which was shame on us. There was actually trail on the other side. But then we walked along this flat area and then up the Nez Perce Trail to meet Ron. And really, it was kind of special, I think, for the three of us to hike on the Nez Perce Trail, because that trail also crosses the Continental Divide Trail outside of Darby, Montana. So the three of us had actually crossed the Nez Perce Trail and hiked on part of it outside of McDonald Pass, which can go to Salmon, Idaho, or to Darby, Montana. So it was pretty cool to get to be on another trail that connects a trail that the three of us have already hiked and really loved. I think there's maybe one more picture of Ron in there.
Oh.
Nope. All right, there you go. Up to Naomi.
All right, yeah, so I'll pick up from Buckhorn Lookout. This had some of the bigger challenges I was talking about earlier. Some of the highlights are Joseph Canyon, which since we've done this, Jared has rerouted it to avoid most of what we had to go through. Just to give you an idea, we were hoping to get down into the canyon and camp down there, and we actually didn't make it to the canyon that night. At one point during that evening, it took us an hour to go 300 feet, not vertical, but horizontal feet. So we ended up having to do like a little rock scramble up to some flat open area to find a place to camp, and had to clear some of the bear scat that he was talking about earlier. And the next day we got up, and our first mile took 2.5 hours just to get to the Joseph Canyon itself and out of Tamarack Gulch. And so then, we were hoping that the trail would improve. We would actually have some trail in the Joseph Canyon, but it actually didn't. So the poison oak came back. We'd have to bushwhack through poison oak, walls of poison oak and walls of blackberry, which is, I'm sure, what the bears were eating, because there was bear scat probably every 50 feet. And like Whitney said, we never actually did see a bear, but there was definitely one down there. We actually even found a old radio bear collar that the bear had shed somehow. So we ended up walking the creek up Joseph Creek off and on, and that took, again, longer than we were hoping. Let's see. So you can see here in this photo that that's some of the blackberries that we'd just have to go through, grin and bear it. This is Mike scouting out a route from that ledge that we camped at, trying to get down to the canyon again and avoid those blackberries in the morning with Whitney. Here is Whitney walking up Joseph Creek, and you can see the smoke there as well.
And let me just chime in real quick. The conditions were so bad on the trail, where there was no trail or poison oak or blackberries, that we probably walked in the creek for over 5 miles. It was just easier to walk up the water than try to walk on a trail.
Yeah, and it felt good on all of our cuts too. And here you can see a nice example of a bear scat cairn. We knew that if we followed these bear scat cairns, that the trail was probably pretty good. So, and then eventually they disappeared, and we'd have to go back into the creek. And you can probably also see the scratches on my legs there from all of the blackberries. Yeah, there's another shot of Joseph Creek. Oh, and there's Mike. Those are some, I don't know what those are called, some kind of stickers, and his whole arm and sleeve were just covered in them. Yeah, not the best. You can see some evidence of human life in Joseph Canyon at some point. Again, you can see the blackberry bushes beyond there. We finally did climb out of Joseph Canyon, and we thought we hit the jackpot when we found a road that took us all the way up to the rim, and come to find out that that wasn't actually the trail we were supposed to be on. It was actually a private road. And we had a nice conversation with the landowner, and he was fine about it. It was fine. Yeah, and then another great section that I think will come back eventually is the Wanaha River Canyon. It has suffered some fire damage as well, and the trail conditions are not the greatest in the middle parts of that trail. On either end, it was pretty good. But again, you know, it was a 31-mile section of that trail that we were hoping to do in a day, and it ended up taking over 2 days. And Jared has told us that they're going to reroute that. So it's maybe 8 miles in the canyon, and then it's going to go up to the rim and avoid the worst part of that trail until they bring the trail back, which I'm sure they will, because it's pretty well known and well used. Here's Whitney crossing the Wanaha River itself. And you can see the evidence of the burn and fallen trees, and there's no trail that you can see in this photo. And that's sort of what we faced was washed out trail, disappearing trail. It was just really, really slow. And finally, the Mount Emily Recreation Area was also an amazing part of this trail. Most of it was on roads, but it was a fantastic ridge walk. Even though we had lots and lots of wildfire smoke, we could still have beautiful and dramatic views. And Jared is also working with them there, because there is a pretty big trail network in the Mount Emily area. And so hopefully some of that will come off of the dirt roads as well. But even considering that it was on Forest Service roads, to us, it was a highlight. So back to Mike.
Yeah, so LeGrand to Sumter. I agree with Jared that this really does feel like the halfway point. And I also want to sort of emphasize that I had driven through LeGrand many times on 84 and never stopped. It's a wonderful town, and it was one of the highlights of the section. In fact, we took 2 days off, our only 2 days off on the trip, because it was such a nice place to stay. And frankly, because the previous section going through Joseph Canyon and the Wanaha were so challenging, we needed a little bit of time to recover. And so LeGrand was great. And then from there, you hike through Anthony Lake Ski Area, which is a really beautiful area. And frankly, although it was mostly on Forest Road getting to, really beautiful. But then from Anthony Lakes, you head into what I think is behind, with the Eagle Cap Wilderness, one of the outstanding hikes in all of Northwest, if not the country. And that's the Elkhorn Crest Trail, which is a national recreation trail. And it's one that I had read about, but never had opportunity to see. And essentially it's 25 or 30 miles of beautiful ridge walk, high elevation, alpine, just gorgeous. The one challenge is there's not much water. It's about a 20-mile dry stretch, though you could drop down into some lake basins 1,000 feet or more to get water if you need it. As you can see, we hiked it on a very cold and rainy day, so water was not an issue for us. But even with the weather conditions, it was definitely a highlight. And especially doing it in the fall, I mean, I think that September is the best month to hike just because of the fall colors and the cooler temperatures. And we got the full blast of fall colors. It just made it an amazing hike. And I wish we could have spent more time there. I do think that in the future, there's so many trails that appear to be in good shape that people could put together great loop hikes or do other hikes in addition to the main route along the crest. And that leads us into Sumter and back to Whitney.
All right, so we had a nice stop in Sumter. Sumter was it wasn't a full 0 day, but it was a good Nero day. We pulled in right before lunch, got to check into our hotel early. And we basically went and ate lunch, went back to our room where we hung out for the entire day and watched it rain after we had arrived in town for the next like 12, 15 hours. So to me, that's the perfect trail day. I laid in a bed, I watched a bunch of dumb movies, and I watched it rain outside. And so to me, Sumter was a really great, nice stop ate some good burgers, and just relaxed. So when we left Sumter and head to Austin Junction, we did experience one pretty good bushwhack. Now, Jared had told us that to expect a bushwhack through an open forest to avoid some mine claims and property outside of the town of Sumter. So we left a very nice Forest Service road and wound up, as you can see, in this lovely open bushwhacky forest. It was kind of slow going. We did discover an old trail in there that had been recently blazed. So that kind of broke it up to make it a little easier. But from there, we then had to do quite a bit of climbing and walking along a mine boundary. And you can see we're kind of looking back towards the Eagle Cap or the Elkhorn Crest where we come from. In that prominent ridge in front of you, that's kind of what we bushwhacked through to kind of get around the mine, where some of the mining claim is. So after that bushwhack though, we then kind of wound up in this other area and wound up in the North Fork of the John Day. This is that old log flume water flume I was talking about. So this is along Lost Creek. And after some of what we'd gone through previously with some of the bushwhacking and the lost trails and overgrown fire damage that no one's gotten in the wilderness areas to log out since then, we were reading on the map that Lost Creek might be just that, lost. So we were very surprised when we pulled up to the trailhead and we saw a fleet of Forest Service vehicles there. And I remember Naomi turned to me, it was a Sunday evening, and she turned to me and said, "Oh, there's probably a trail crew and they're doing trail maintenance." To which point I was very cynical and said, "You're dreaming. There's no way that's actually happening." We started up a trail, saw this really cool old historic waterway, and then ran into some hunters coming out who said, "Oh yeah, there's a Forest Service trail crew like 3 miles up the trail. They're logging this out right now." So it actually, what we thought was gonna be a very bad bushwhack, the North Fork John Day really turned into a really spectacular, wonderful experience for us in section of the hike. I mean, it was absolutely stunningly beautiful at the big mountains. We went through Vinegar Hill in that region, and then we just dropped into this just absolutely stunning canyon along the North Fork of the John Day. And I would say that's definitely one of the highlights. If you're looking for a hike that doesn't have a ton of elevation, maybe you have someone who's a beginner backpacker or someone who just can't really handle a lot of up and down, this would be an area I'd highly recommend you to go check out going in at the Crane Creek Trailhead, because it was relatively flat, but also just had absolutely stunning beauty. And I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that that is a national or a scenic and wild river, this section that we hiked through. Jared shaking his head yes. So it's a really spectacular area. There was some old mining evidence there. I don't know if we have any photos of that, but we did come across some old like historic miner cabins, and the water was plentiful. But you can just see right there. I mean, it's kind of what you walk through all day, is just you're up above the river, right next to it, and just kind of walking this beautiful forested canyon the whole day. We did have a friend come out and meet us there. That was kind of a highlight for us. Our friend Drop and Roll and her boyfriend Dan, Mother Dan, they drove out to meet us. We missed them the night before, but the next morning they met us at the Crane Creek Trailhead in a pouring rainstorm, where they proceeded to pull out a pile of baked goods and food and make us a wonderful breakfast before they sent us on our way. And I always say, I was in a pretty kind of gruff mood that morning. I'd been pretty cold and wet, and disappointed we didn't see him the night before. And it was cold and wet and rainy. And she made us breakfast. And about an hour after we left them for breakfast, the sun came out, it warmed up. We're in this beautiful valley. And it just, I feel like that moment of like just seeing our friends and having trail magic kind of set the tone for the whole day to get better. And it was just really just a wonderful, spectacular day. After the John Day River, do we have a picture of Vinegar Hill? Okay, so this is kind of like when we left the river, you can see we kind of got kind of back up in the high alpine terrain area, and then just had a really lovely walk into Austin Junction. I mean, you go over Vinegar Hill, which is kind of a historic area, and then you just kind of drop down and walk along the north shore of the John Day River right into town by Bates State Park, and it's a really nice road walk.
Yeah. Are you done? Yeah. Brings us to Austin Junction and the final leg of our trip. So by this time for us, it was late September. It was getting pretty cold, and mornings were really, really cold. Some of the roads that we were planning on walking had been logged over. I think I shared a photo of that earlier where just sort of had to find your way around. This photo is Table Rock, and you can see the little lookout up there. That was our destination. And that was very, very good trail all the way to the top. There's actually a fire lookout person there, and she gave us the rundown of the surrounding area. She had a really cute cat. And it was absolutely just beautiful. We had 360-degree views, including the Monument Rock Wilderness around us. And again, we didn't know what kind of trail conditions to expect, and occasionally we'd be tempted by a trail leaving the road that looks like it's good trail, and we decide to take it, and it turns pretty bad pretty quickly, but we keep going forward because we don't want to go back, and you get stung by a bee, and all of those good things happen. So and then after that, we get to the Strawberry Mountain Wilderness, which is also one of the scenic highlights, and something that had been on my list as an Oregonian for years, and I'd never been there. So fantastic scenery. Most of that hike was a ridge walk, and so we had incredible views on both sides, but again, that leaves you open to lack of water. And we were very pleasantly surprised to find that all of the sources that we thought would be there were still there. And that's late September, early October. They were still running, which was fantastic. And they were running well, really, really good water. And you can see in this photo too that it's got some burned out sections in the Strawberry Mountains. But it's also, it's neat to see nature coming back. And Strawberry Mountain, or Strawberry Lake, that was fortunate timing that we got to camp there. It's a beautiful, beautiful campsite. And again, heading up into the Alpine again. And here's a nice shot of nature coming back through the burn, which I just love to see that. Yeah, here's Whitney at Strawberry Lake. And yeah, I'll turn it to Whitney for some closing thoughts. By the way, this photo right here is our very last campsite. So we're sort of on this beautiful open lookout looking down into John Day. And it was just a fantastic way to end the hike.
All right. So closing thoughts. First, I'd like to back up and just say, when we had Trail Magic, Weather Dan made us some quesadillas that morning. And I have to say, I think one of my biggest regrets of the trail was after I ate 3 quesadillas, a bunch of blueberry pie, cookies, coffee, and scones, is that I didn't pack out 3 or 4 quesadillas in my pack for lunch that afternoon. So I would say that's a rookie mistake right there. If someone's there making you quesadillas, always take a quesadilla or 2 to go, because you might not be hungry then. You're going to be hungry later. So closing thoughts. The opportunity and potential for this to be a new long distance trail, I think, is one of the biggest benefits of what GHCC and the visionaries bringing this trail together are doing. I know personally, Ron and me have long discussions at our office day in and day out about the need to start spreading out use of users on trails around the United States, instead of just hammering time and time again the Sisters or Mount Jefferson or the Lillard or the Timberline, or even the PCT, the AT, the CDT. I mean, all these regular well-known trails. Is that really the best thing to do, is to start spreading people out and reducing our impact on trails? And I think this is a great opportunity to have a new long distance trail that's a great length. I mean, it's a trail that most people could do probably in 5 to 6 weeks. So it's not, hey, I got to quit my job. You could probably get a leave of absence for 5 or 6 weeks and go do this trail. So it's really nice to have another trail being developed in this kind of mileage length long term. There's also great opportunity for connectivity in our region. I know there's already talk about trying to connect this trail, if not at one, but both ends of the Blue Mountain Trail, to different parts of the Oregon Desert Trail. being able to link up those two trails would really be kind of a super trail through the eastern side of Oregon. And from someone who's done the Oregon Desert Trail and the Blue Mountain Trail, to be able to connect those is really, really intriguing to me, because I think it would really highlight the diversity of Eastern Oregon all in one spot. And then I think there's also just a ton of opportunity long-term for people to be able to do multi-day backpacking trips, incorporating parts of this trail. And some areas that we highlighted where I think that'd be really possible would be, of course, the Eagle Caps. I think there's a lot of opportunities in there from multiple day hikes, but then also areas where not a lot of people go backpacking, such as Hell's Canyon. Honestly, Hell's Canyon to me was one of the most surprising and wonderful parts of the trip. I really expected it to be really just kind of like deserty and pretty barren, and I was wonderfully surprised at how diverse the forest was, how stunning the ridge walks were all day long. I mean, you don't even actually have to go down into the canyons necessarily all the way to the river to be able to make some pretty cool backpacking trips. As Mike mentioned, the Elkhorn Crest, I mean, that's world-class hiking right there. It's world-class beauty, and I think that's a great area if you want to explore parts of the Blue Mountains in Eastern Oregon. That'd be a great place to look at going to. Also, the North Fork of the John Day River, like I said, great place for a beginner backpacker or someone new to backpacking, because it is very forgiving, easy terrain, well-maintained trail, and there's a lot of water, so you don't have to burden someone with a ton of water to carry. And then the Strawberry Mountains, particularly the Pine Mountain area of the Strawberries, that area to me just really stands out in my mind as a beautiful place to try to go in and make a loop for a couple of days and, you know, not kill yourself having to do 20, 30 miles, but just kind of take your time and explore the beauty and enjoy those strawberries. So I think really closes out, there's just a lot of great opportunity to explore this region. And I think as Naomi touched on, and we talked a lot while we were out there, there are some challenges to this region that need to be addressed, and that only by using this area as recreationists can things change. One is many lesser used trails are disappearing. It's a major thing across our entire country that wilderness areas, after forest fires, storms, natural disasters, we don't have people to go in there and log these things out. And unless people start using them and recording their use at trailheads, the Forest Service doesn't know people are using them. They're not going to allocate funds and resources to go build or maintain trail in an area if they don't think people are using it. That's just the reality, especially in a wilderness area. I think the other thing is, you know, we talked about overcrowding of national trails on a long distance hiking scale, but I think also in our own backyard, there's a lot of overcrowding. If COVID hasn't shown us that, it was already started long before this year. So I really would encourage anybody from the Portland area that, you know, why it's great and easy to jump in your car and go to Goat Rocks and see 10,000 people on a weekend. If you drive just like 2.5, 3 hours further, you could go to some pretty amazing areas in Hell's Canyon or the Wallowas or the Elkhorn Crest and really not see anybody and really spread out that use. So just build an extra day, take Friday off along with your weekend hike, drive that little extra bit and really spread out the use. I think that's a great area. And the last thing I would say is, you know, to anybody out there that loves being in the outdoors and loves, you know, trails, do consider 1 year taking a week of your time and volunteering with a nonprofit group. I've done some trail trips with the ONDA. It's a really fun. I mean, I know a lot of that's on pause because of COVID, but that will be coming back in the next year or two. But consider volunteering with Greater Hell's Canyon Council, or they could probably put you in touch with somebody who's going to do some work on this trail or with ONDA on the Oregon Desert Trail. But really, as users, we need to also consider taking a week instead of backpacking and going and doing trail maintenance to help preserve these trails and keep them around for future generations to experience what we get to experience every day. And that's my closing thoughts.
I'll add one thing to that. I'd like to reemphasize the whole solitude thing. Once we left the Eagle Cap Wilderness, we did not see a single other hiker, backpacker, day hiker, otherwise. We saw some hunters. That was it. So if you want some solitude, this is it.
Yeah, it's largely been my experience in years of backpacking, man. The trails out there, it's pretty amazing. Mike, Naomi, Whitney, thank you guys for sharing the experience. The photos are great. What an awesome trip. We learned a lot from you guys. The route is not as much elevation gain and loss as they experienced. We've shortened them up. We've rerouted through the worst of Joseph Canyon's blackberry brambles and created a new route through the area, as well as alternates around the Wanaha River Trail. And yeah, many of these areas are going to look different in the years to come because we're going to be able to prioritize maintenance in a new way. But what a great trip.
It was a great.
So we did have a couple questions from even before the show started. Someone emailed us with a couple questions, and then we got a couple that we missed throughout the presentation. So I just wanted to touch on those. And Jared, this might be a question for you. What are the plans for updating and posting topo maps and the data book with the 2020 ground truth data?
Yeah, great question. So we are still in the process of taking all the feedback. So like I said, after our Intrepid Trio finished, Renee Patrick was right behind them and have a new kind of route that's in the works and an updated data book we're working on. At this stage, anyone who's looking to do the full through hike next summer, please just email me and I'll start to work through resources with you and make sure you're prepared for some of the sections of the trail and probably send you out with some checks and sections. I want you to do some more reconnoitering on for me when you're out there. We have, the trail does run through some very well-known trail sections. So if you're on the Elkhorn Crest or hiking through the Wallowas, you can now say you were part of the Blue Mountains Trail along with Strawberry Crest and the North Fork John Day and many other areas. And then there are areas that will build full section maps and resources available to the general public for. For anyone who is taking on the through hike, there are still resupply challenges we're working on and additional resources we want to make sure are put in place before we make a public map set available. Because it's really important to us that you have an amazing time when you're out there and are prepared for some of the challenges you'll meet along the way. One of the best ways too is just to follow the trail updates on the website. The link was in my slides and I can send that out again as a way to just make sure you're first in line for any of the updates as they do come out, including resources and maps.
Perfect. Another question was, I hike with two pooches, a 7-year-old 50-pound and a 6-year-old 75-pounder, and I'm curious if in your esteem that is ill-advised on the Blue Mountain Trail.
Personally, I've hiked with dogs for thousands and thousands of miles. I found a dog in the Appalachian Trail I thru hiked with. I have a 12-year-old black lab that I've done a lot of thru hiking with. And this is not a trail I'd probably take my dog on. There are sections you could take your dog on. I would consider taking my dog in the Wallowas. I consider taking my dog on the Elkhorn Crest. I would not want to take my dog in a Hell's Canyon. I wouldn't want to take him in the Wanaha River area. If you were thinking about doing a thru hike with your dog on this trail, I don't think this is the trail for that. They'd have to be pretty hardy. There's some pretty tough stuff, and I can't imagine trying to pick up my dog and get him over every single blowdown I had to pick up myself and get over all day long there. So it's just my 2 cents about it.
And make sure your dog doesn't chase wildlife because there's going to be a lot of opportunities to take off running too, even on the Elkhorn Crest.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. If I had my dog in the Elkhorn Crest, I would definitely have them leashed just because those mountain goats just didn't care. I mean, I literally got within like 75 feet of a mountain goat and had to say, hey, buddy. And he just looked at me and kind of didn't even really move. And I was kind of like worried to get any closer. I was afraid to get gored, but eventually you just had to kind of push past him. So.
Another question is, did you feel prepared for that much elevation gain? That's almost 3,000 feet per day.
I think Mike was prepared. Yeah, I mean, so here's my theory on that, and it is hard. And what I've learned, especially as I get older, a couple things. One is to try to always stay in shape, always keep walking, not just wait until you're ready for a big trip and then throw in your pack. And the other thing is, especially as I get older, weight makes a big difference. So trying to be more conscientious about what I bring, how I pack, how I stay prepared, how I train my body becomes more important. It is hard. This is not a trail for someone right off the couch to do the kind of miles that they may want to be doing. It's physically, it's much harder than the Pacific Crest Trail or the Continental Divide Trail or some of those others.
Another question.
Can I just say one thing too?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Is I've done the Oregon Desert Trail, and I've done this trail, and Mike and Naomi, there was a couple of days they were like, "Oh, is this like the Oregon Desert Trail?" I said, And there was a couple of times on this hike in particular where we were doing some really gnarly bushwhacks and stuff where I just said, I never did anything this hard on the Oregon Desert Trail. And the challenge of the Oregon Desert Trail was lack of water. And there are some tough bushwhacks like in the Steens, but generally the Oregon Desert Trail would kind of take you to its limit. And then all of a sudden it would kind of back you off, and all of a sudden have a road walk be really nice, where like the Wanaha Canyon, we got in there, and our second day we hiked for 11 hours and we did 12 miles. So this trail just had a lot more kind of challenges for me, but part of that was no one had ever done it. So we didn't really know what to expect. It was that great unknown. I think that really caused a lot of challenge, and the elevation was tough, but I think the three of us had done a lot this year together because of COVID. We all bought bikes. We've been doing a lot of bike packing and like hiking and stuff. So it's like we stay active throughout the year, which makes a big difference. But I just think the great unknown and going into places where no one had been before or in a long time made it a lot more challenging.
Oh, for sure. I'm sure. I mean, you're going in almost blind for some of these sections.
Yeah.
Were there any permits needed for any of the areas you were in?
Just self-issued wilderness permits.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then we had a question earlier that Jared answered in the Q&A, but I just wanted to touch on it. What worked best for navigation? Were you guys using maps, apps, GPS, Boy Scout tricks, or Girl Scout tricks?
We use Gaia primarily, which
Okay.
is an app on your phone, a GPS app. And then we also each carried a set of paper maps as a reference.
Cool. What percentages of the trail were type 1 versus type 2 versus type 3 fun?
Oh. Wow.
Naomi?
And for anyone who doesn't know, type 1 is like you're having a blast, and type 3 is like you never want to do it again. And type 2 is it's not fun in the moment, but fun afterwards. So go ahead.
And in that perspective, I would hike it again. So 0% type 3. Type 2 would probably be 25%.
That seems fair.
Well, the point I'd make, and Jared brought this up earlier, that we were out there ground truthing, and so the feedback we came up with has been being incorporated. So future hikers won't have to go through the really, really hard sections. So Renee, who is just a month behind us, or a couple weeks behind us, we took some different routes. So Joseph Canyon, where we had to walk in a creek for miles and took an hour to go 300 feet. That's not like that anymore. So, but I will say, even those really horrendous sections where we're ripped up from the blackberries and we've got some poison oak in places we don't want to mention, you forget about that stuff. And looking back, I'm really glad I did it. I mean, it was really fun, and it's really neat to hike in some of these areas where that people probably haven't been in there for years, and may not be in there for years in the future. I mean, what it made me feel a little sad about is I'm not sure some of those trails are going to come back. The Wanaha River, I think, will come back. It's just such an incredible wilderness. Joseph Canyon, I worry more about. That it should come back. It's important.
Well said, Mike.
That's the end of this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button below so you never miss an episode. We love hearing from our audience, so if you have feedback, would like to discuss these topics further, or if you or someone you know would be a good future guest, please let us know. Until next time, remember, adventure is better together.